You have to picture it. The year is 1907. Liverpool's docks are alive with steam, coal smoke, and the buzz of a crowd that has come to witness something extraordinary. People are talking, laughing, pointing toward the water. And there it is, the RMS Lusitania. A ship so magnificent, so luxurious, that even now, over a century later, the memory of her elegance feels almost unreal. Passengers are boarding, ladies in flowing dresses, hats perched perfectly, children running along the decks, their laughter blending with the call of seagulls. Men in suits carry cigars and newspapers, speaking in hurried tones about the promise of this new vessel. They do not yet know, they cannot know, that beneath all this beauty, the Lusitania is hiding secrets. Look closer, and you notice it. The steel of the hull is stronger than it needs to be. Compartments exist where no passenger will ever see. Every rivet, every beam, every hidden corner is part of a plan that the world will not understand until years later. To the builders, this was not just a ship. It was a statement of power, a statement that Britain would rule the seas, and perhaps a statement of something darker, something waiting beneath the surface. Now imagine the engineers walking through the engine rooms. Heat presses down from the massive turbines, coal dust coating their sleeves. They check and double-check the machinery, every bolt, every pipe, every detail. They know what they are building. They know how fast this ship can go, and what she could survive, or not survive, and yet, the passengers have no idea. They think this is just a ship, a safe passage across the Atlantic. But safety, as we will see, can be an illusion. And here's the thing about illusions, they can be beautiful. Walk through her first-class lounges, and it is easy to believe the hype. Golden chandeliers reflect sunlight, polished wood gleams under careful hands. Waiters move gracefully serving meals to families who smile and talk and laugh. The newspapers will tell them she's unsinkable, the fastest ship to ever cross the Atlantic. And they believe it, because they want to believe it. Who could suspect that what looks like perfection might be hiding disaster? But shadows are never far away. Across the Atlantic, things are changing. Germany has begun deploying U-boats, silent hunters beneath the waves, unseen, unheard. And the British Admiralty, they trust speed and size to protect their liners. They believe that Lusitania, with her unparalleled speed, will always outrun danger, and maybe for a moment, she will. But the ocean has a way of reminding everyone that beauty and luxury are no shields against fate. Meanwhile, on deck, passengers wave to the dock as the ship sails away. Children lean over the railing, parents smile, and the ship moves gracefully through the water. But beneath the decks, in hidden rooms and sealed compartments, there are things that passengers cannot see. Cargo that they will never know exists. Documents and letters hidden from public eyes. And whispers, quiet, deliberate, almost invisible whispers of planning and secrecy that only a few understand. Now, take a moment and imagine standing on that deck yourself. Feel the sun on your face, the breeze brushing your hair, the calm sea stretching endlessly ahead. Listen to the laughter, the conversations, the clinking of dishes, and then try to imagine that under all this safety and celebration, a storm of consequences is already forming. You do not hear it yet, you do not feel it, but it is there, waiting, and it will find you, whether you believe in it or not. For the Lusitania is more than a ship. She's a puzzle of human ambition, a mix of pride, power, and secrecy. Her passengers are unaware, her crew focused on their duties, and the world applauding. But every detail from reinforced steel to secret compartments hints that this is no ordinary voyage. This is a voyage that will end in tragedy, a story that will shock the world. And the first threads of that story are already being woven, quietly, invisibly, beneath the waves. And here's the final thought for this first part. The passengers believe they are safe. The newspapers believe she is safe. The world believes she is safe. But in the shadows, the truth waits, A truth that is more dangerous than any storm, more hidden than the deepest parts of the Atlantic, and more real than anyone aboard could imagine. Because Lusitania was not just a ship, she was a secret, a lie wrapped in luxury, and her story is only just. It was late afternoon, and the Atlantic had transformed under the sun into a mirror of gold and silver. The ship's hull cut through the water smoothly, almost arrogantly, as if it knew the world admired it. On deck, passengers stretched lazily, sipping tea or gazing at the endless horizon. Children played hide-and-seek around polished railings, their laughter echoing faintly across the waves. Couples strolled quietly, lost in each other's company. Everything looked peaceful, perfect, even. But let me tell you a secret: the Atlantic never stays calm for long, and beauty can be the deadliest disguise. Beneath the decks, behind layers of steel and polished wood, the ship was humming with tension. The cargo hold, a place few would ever see, contained crates that whispered of danger, materials, documents, and supplies that no passenger could have guessed. Crew members moved carefully, double-checking locks, murmuring to each other in voices low enough that nobody above deck could hear. Every step they took, every glance they exchanged, carried a sense of unease that seemed almost alive. The captain was on the bridge, staring at the horizon with eyes that missed nothing. From afar, he must have looked calm, authoritative, in control, but inside, he was measuring every risk. Telegrams from distant ports had warned of U-boat activity along the Irish coast. The messages were vague, mysterious, almost like riddles, but their meaning was clear. The Atlantic, calm as it seemed, was hiding predators. Silent hunters glided beneath the waves, invisible yet very real. And while the passengers carried on, living in their bubble of luxury, the ship itself seemed to hold its breath. Every creak of polished wood, every groan of steel under the engines, every ripple against the hull was a reminder that the Atlantic had a memory, and it was patient. The luxury above was almost like a spell, lulling everyone into a false sense of safety. But the truth, hidden below, was waiting. In the first-class lounge, a pianist's soft melody floated across the room, blending with conversation and laughter. A young couple leaned close, whispering quietly. A businessman adjusted his cufflinks, talking about deals he would make once they reached New York. Children leaned on their parents, asking questions about the vast ocean that stretched endlessly beyond the deck. And above it all, the golden sunlight filtered through windows, reflecting off chandeliers in a warm, almost hypnotic glow. But even as the world above seemed untouched, below it, shadows were moving. A German U-boat had picked up the Lusitania's trail hours earlier, silent and unseen, sliding through the water with lethal patience. The captain didn't yet know the exact location of the threat, but instinct whispered that it was near. Crew members exchanged subtle glances, the kind that passengers would never notice. A hushed tension had begun to thread itself through every corridor, every deck, every engine room. The Atlantic had grown quieter, somehow heavier, as if it to sense the danger coming. By the time evening approached, painting the Atlantic in deep oranges and purples, there was a subtle shift in the energy aboard. Passengers were still laughing, still moving through the lounges, still believing in the safety of speed, size, and luxury, but the crew could feel it, the quiet pressure of something unseen, the weight of anticipation, the kind of moment when even the smallest misstep could have consequences beyond imagination. Some officers whispered about the cargo, about how a single spark in the wrong place could turn everything into chaos. Others studied the horizon, scanning for shadows that might not be visible, yet were very real. And that is the cruel trick of the Atlantic. It can look endless, calm, and forgiving. It can carry people across thousands of miles with elegance and grace. And yet, in its depths, it is always waiting for the moment when human ambition, luxury, and ignorance collide with something beyond control. The night settled in slowly, stars flickering above, reflecting faintly on the dark water. The passengers, unaware, leaned against railings, wrote letters, and admired the seemingly endless ocean. But beneath the decks, in the hum of engines and the secret compartments, a tension built. Crates that should have been invisible seemed to thrum with hidden purpose. The Atlantic itself seemed to hold its breath, patient and silent, waiting for the moment when all threads, the speed, the cargo, the hidden U-boat, the human decisions would finally come together. And as the ship sailed into darkness, you could feel it if you were watching closely, a subtle unease in the air, the hush that falls before a storm, the knowledge that something unseen is approaching. The passengers might have smiled, laughed, and slept soundly, but the Atlantic, beautiful and endless, had already begun writing a story that nobody aboard could. Night had fallen over the Atlantic, and the Lusitania sailed like a ghost through the black waters. The sun had disappeared behind the horizon hours ago, leaving behind a sky spattered with stars, their faint light reflected in the gentle waves. On deck, the passengers were mostly inside, gathering in lounges, dining halls, and cabins. The soft glow of lamps lit the corridors, golden light reflecting off polished wood and brass. Children were tucked into their beds, parents whispered quietly, and a few couples strolled along the deck, leaning close to hear each other over the gentle creaking of the ship. But the calm was deceptive. There was a tension in the air that only those who had reason to know could feel. Crew members moved silently through the corridors, checking compartments, consulting charts, and exchanging whispers. The captain stood alone on the bridge, eyes scanning the dark horizon, reading the water for patterns, invisible to ordinary eyes. Something was out there, hidden beneath the surface, silent, patient, waiting. Beneath the decks, the engines hummed with a steady rhythm, vibrating through the hull. Engineers worked quietly, adjusting pressure valves and checking the turbines. Coal dust coated their sleeves, and sweat shone on their foreheads under the dim lights. Every bolt, every pipe, every machine was scrutinized. The Lusitania was a marvel of engineering, yes, but even the most perfect machine is vulnerable to the unseen, and the Atlantic had learned that long before. The cargo, hidden in locked compartments, seemed almost to thrum with quiet menace. Crates stacked neatly, some marked innocuously, others completely unmarked, were waiting. Materials that could explode if mishandled, letters that could ignite political storms if discovered. The crew moved with caution, aware of the potential for catastrophe, speaking only in hushed tones. The passengers above had no idea. They laughed, they dined, they danced, believing in the unsinkable elegance of the ship. And that is always the cruelest part of such stories, how life can feel so safe and beautiful when danger is already circling beneath. As the night deepened, a subtle change began to ripple across the water. A shadow moved beneath the waves, impossible to see from the deck. Somewhere in the Atlantic, a German U-boat had picked up the Lusitania's trail, silent, patient, invisible. The crew couldn't see it yet, but the seasoned officers felt its presence like a cold breath on the back of their necks. The captain ordered small adjustments to course, subtle changes that might make a difference or they might not. Every decision carried weight beyond imagining. Every mile brought the ship closer to an unknown threat. On deck, a few passengers wandered quietly, enjoying the cool night air. The ocean stretched endlessly, black and shimmering. The waves whispered softly against the hull, almost like a lullaby, but even lullabies can be deceptive. The horizon held nothing but black water, yet somewhere beneath, something moved with intention, with patience, with deadly focus. Crew members leaned against railings, peering into the dark, feeling an unease that could not be dismissed. It was instinct more than sight, a quiet warning that something was very, very wrong. Inside the dining halls and lounges, conversation continued. Some passengers discussed the beauty of the night sky. Others shared plans for New York, but every sound above deck seemed muted against the hum of the engines below, against the silence of the Atlantic around them. And in that silence, in that vastness, danger lurked. Every passing second carried the weight of possibilities, the cargo below, the ship's speed, The hunter beneath the waves, the decisions made quietly in offices far away. The night deepened further. Stars reflected faintly on the gentle ripples, a serene mask over a treacherous sea. Crew members whispered about the signals, the subtle irregularities in the water, signs that human eyes could barely interpret, but that seasoned sailors knew could mean life or death. A few of them paused in the dark corridors, listening to the low hum of the turbines, sensing a rhythm in the water that felt wrong, and no passenger slept, danced, or wrote letters. The tension below was tangible, almost alive. Suddenly, a faint ripple caught the eye of one officer. Nothing visible, just a disturbance in the pattern of the waves, subtle but deliberate, a warning signal, almost imperceptible, that the U-boat was closer than anyone had expected. The captain, reading his instruments and charts, felt the familiar tightening in his chest. There were no alarms, no visible threats above deck, yet he knew that in the Atlantic, calm could be the deadliest trick. Every mile now was charged, every decision critical. In the cabins, children stirred slightly, mothers soothed them, and passengers occasionally glanced toward the dark horizon, sensing only the vastness, not the predator that tracked them. The crew, trained to notice every anomaly, moved with quiet urgency, checking hidden compartments, confirming that the cargo was secure, and whispering reassurances to each other. The tension was unspoken, but understood. It was the kind of night where the Atlantic itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable collision of human ambition, engineering marvel, and the unseen predator below. And so the Lusitania sailed on, elegant and oblivious, passengers immersed in beauty and comfort, the crew tense and watchful, and the Atlantic vast and patient, hiding a hunter that would soon make its prison. The night deepened, and the Atlantic stretched into a black expanse that seemed endless. The Lusitania, proud and elegant, continued her journey, cutting through the water with silent confidence. On deck, the passengers had mostly retired to their cabins or lounges. The soft glow of lamps painted faces in warm, golden light. Some leaned quietly against the railings, staring at the horizon, mesmerized by the silver path of moonlight stretching across the waves. Others whispered plans for New York, spoke of business or leisure, or read letters from loved ones. Yet, in the quiet corners of the ship, the tension was growing. Crew members moved silently, checking hidden compartments, locking crates, and whispering to one another in low, urgent tones. Even the seasoned officers felt a chill in the air, a subtle unease that could not be explained by the calm of the sea or the beauty of the night. Every creak of the steel hull, every subtle vibration from the engines, every faint murmur of the waves against the bow reminded them that beneath the surface, something was watching. The captain stood alone on the bridge, his eyes scanning the dark horizon, his thoughts heavy with warnings and intelligence reports. Somewhere below the waves, a German U-boat had picked up the Lusitania's trail, silent, patient, invisible. Every passing minute brought it closer. The captain adjusted the ship's course slightly, small corrections intended to reduce risk, but he knew the ocean could not be outsmarted. The Atlantic had its own rules, its own patience, and it had already begun to shape the outcome of this journey. Below decks, the hum of turbines filled the air, vibrating through the steel frame of the ship. Engineers moved carefully, checking every bolt, every valve, every connection, knowing that even the smallest miscalculation could have catastrophic results. Crates of cargo waited silently in the hold, some ordinary, others dangerous beyond imagination. The crew whispered warnings to one another, aware that the combination of speed, hidden cargo, and an unseen predator beneath the waves made this voyage more fragile than the passengers above could ever imagine. On the deck, the passengers were beginning to feel subtle hints of unease without knowing why. A few noticed that the ocean's surface had changed slightly, the waves moving in irregular patterns, the reflections of the moonlight disturbed in places that should have been smooth. A gentle gust of wind brought a chill to the air, unusual for this time of year, and some paused in their strolls, glancing at the horizon as if expecting something to appear. But nothing did. The sea appeared calm, the moonlight sparkled. The orchestra's faint notes echoed from the lounge. All was seemingly perfect, and yet, in the shadows, movement persisted. The U-boat tracked silently beneath, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. The Atlantic, calm above, was alive below, currents shifting subtly, hiding the predator in its folds. Crew members, trained to notice these subtle signs, exchanged glances. They were tense, but silent, careful not to alarm the passengers. The whispers became more urgent as instruments indicated small but detectable disturbances, irregularities in the sonar and water patterns, subtle signs of a hunter nearby. Inside the dining halls, conversation had slowed. Some passengers noted the stillness outside, the unusual calm, and felt a strange thrill of anticipation, not fear. Others dismissed it, lulled by the music and the luxury surrounding them. The golden chandeliers glowed warmly, the polished wood reflected the dim lights, and laughter still rose in soft bursts, but the Atlantic itself seemed to tense, holding its breath as the predator closed in. The crew moved with quiet precision, checking cargo, inspecting locks, and reviewing course corrections. Every officer was aware that one misstep could trigger disaster. Small gestures, almost imperceptible hands resting briefly on railings, eyes scanning the horizon, whispered communications carried the weight of life or death. They knew the sea was patient, the hunter was patient, and the time would come when both would strike without warning. As midnight approached, the air seemed heavier. The waves, still silent, carried the promise of hidden danger. Crew members felt it in the vibration of the hull, the hum of the engines, the irregular patterns in the water. Passengers, still immersed in beauty and comfort, sensed only an unnameable tension, like a shadow just beyond sight. It was the kind of night where even the most rational minds could feel a chill, a quiet whisper of doom that could not yet be named. And so the Lusitania continued, elegant, majestic, unaware that the threads of fate were drawing tighter. Above, passengers lived in blissful ignorance, surrounded by luxury and laughter. Below, the crew prepared silently, aware that every decision mattered. Beneath the hull, the Atlantic carried the unseen hunter closer with each mile. Every second passed with the weight of anticipation. Every sound, every vibration, every ripple was a harbinger. And the Atlantic, infinite and patient, held its secret close, waiting for the night when the story would erupt into stretching endlessly in every direction. The Lusitania moved steadily, its engines humming through the hull at a slow heartbeat. On deck, the air had grown cooler, carrying a faint metallic scent that some passengers noticed but dismissed as nothing more than the sea. A few passengers leaned over the railing, staring into the black waves, unaware of the shadows lurking beneath. Inside the lounges, the atmosphere was still elegant but quieter. Conversations had slowed. The music from the piano seemed softer, almost hesitant, as if the ship itself sensed something was wrong. A gentleman glanced at the horizon and then shook his head, dismissing the uneasy feeling as fatigue. Children huddled near their parents, and couples whispered softly. The golden glow of chandeliers painted the walls warmly, masking the creeping tension. Below deck, the crew was on edge. Officers moved quietly, but swiftly, checking the cargo and confirming the seals on crates they had inspected countless times before. The hum of the turbines vibrated through the steel floor, and every engineer felt it, an almost imperceptible change in rhythm, a subtle vibration that did not belong. The crates, innocent in appearance, carried danger in silence. A single spark, a single disturbance, could unleash chaos, and the crew knew it. Suddenly, a subtle but unmistakable signal came from the water, a disturbance that caught the sharp eyes of one lookout stationed on the crow's nest. He froze, eyes narrowing as he focused on a faint ripple in the black Atlantic. It wasn't like the usual waves, the pattern was deliberate, calculated. He called the officer on duty, whispering urgently. Maps and instruments were checked again. The captain adjusted the course slightly, silently, hoping to avoid any confrontation. But deep down, he knew the ocean had already decided its next move. On deck, some passengers began to notice small irregularities. A strange shiver ran along the water's surface, reflections that didn't match the moonlight, subtle sounds that seemed out of place, like the soft echo of steel moving underwater. One woman clutched her shawl tighter, glancing nervously at the dark waves. A man whispered to his companion about a shadow he thought he saw in the water, but nobody could confirm it. The laughter and comfort of earlier hours had faded into quiet murmurs and curiosity tinged with unease. Inside the lower decks, crew members whispered in low tones, moving quickly between compartments, checking locks and confirming every cargo manifest. The tension was thick enough to feel in the air. A taut line stretched across the entire ship. Engineers noted slight fluctuations in the engine's hum, a minor anomaly that might have been dismissed in calmer conditions, but tonight, nothing was ordinary. Every vibration, every sound, every motion carried meaning. The Atlantic, calm on the surface, hid its hunter well. Somewhere beneath, the U-boat tracked the Lusitania with calculated patience, its crew observing the ship's movements, waiting for the perfect angle, the precise moment to strike. Each second brought the vessel closer to danger. The captain's instincts were on high alert. He had studied countless intelligence reports, evaluated every possible risk, and yet the uncertainty gnawed at him. Nothing about this night was ordinary, and every passing minute carried the weight of a decision that could mean life or death. As midnight approached, the tension became almost unbearable. The passengers, now aware of subtle oddities, glanced over railings more often, listening for sounds that shouldn't be there, noticing the faint vibrations underfoot. Crew members exchanged quick, silent nods, moving swiftly and efficiently, but with a weight in their eyes that betrayed the convocade. Every action, every glance, every whisper mattered. And then came the first undeniable sign of faint, distant disturbance in the water, unmistakable to those trained to see it. The U-boat had moved closer. Its presence was now a shadow beneath the waves, hidden from passengers, but impossible for the crew to ignore. Officers quietly briefed each other, adjusting course in the hopes of evading the threat. Every move was precise, every command carefully measured. The Atlantic, infinite and patient, had drawn its line, and the first threads of confrontation were about to unravel. Above deck, the passengers felt it to a subtle, pervasive unease that could not be explained. The water looked different under the moonlight. Shadows moved where they shouldn't. The hum of the engines seemed heavier, almost like a warning. Some stopped walking, staring at the horizon with unease creeping into their expressions. The luxury, the elegance, the laughter, it all felt distant now, fragile, temporary. The calm of the Atlantic was gone, replaced by the quiet threat of a predator beneath. And in that darkness, as the ship sailed steadily forward, the crew knew the truth. The Atlantic was no longer a simple expanse of water. It was a stage, and the hunter was patient, deliberate, and precise. Every mile brought the Lusitania closer to its fate. Every heartbeat, every creak, every whispered order below deck was part of a growing tension that would soon erupt, and the passengers, blissfully unaware moments ago, were now only steps away from witnessing the shadow of history descending upon them. The night had grown heavier, darker, as if the Atlantic itself was holding its breath. The Lusitania cut through the waves with steady purpose, her lights glowing softly, reflecting on the black water like golden ribbons in the moonlight. On deck, only a few passengers lingered, pulled by curiosity or sleeplessness. The rest had retreated to their cabins or lounges, unaware of the tension quietly threading through the vessel, but the crew felt it. Every vibration of the hull, every subtle shift in the waves, every almost imperceptible change in the engine's hum screamed that something was near. Engineers checked the turbines again, though they had done so countless times before, and officers reviewed course charts, quietly debating small adjustments to avoid whatever unseen predator followed them. The cargo hold was checked again, locks reinforced, crew members whispering urgent instructions to one another in low, clipped tones. The atmosphere below decks was taut, charged, as if even the walls themselves were aware that something was coming. Above deck, the passengers noticed things too, though they couldn't put them into words. The Atlantic's reflection of the moon had grown restless, rippling in ways that didn't match the breeze. The waves, though gentle, seemed to carry a subtle menace. A gentleman paused mid-step, staring at the horizon. "Do you see that?" he whispered to his companion. But the companion saw nothing, only the calm black water, and shrugged. The feeling of unease had no name yet. It was instinct, intuition, the sense that something unseen and powerful was moving beneath. Below, officers huddled quietly, exchanging urgent glances. The subtle movements in the water, the irregular vibrations, the faint disturbances detected by keen eyes, they all confirmed the unthinkable. The U-boat was close, closer than anyone had dared imagine. Adjustments were made to the ship's course, subtle and careful, designed to confuse the hunter beneath. The captain remained calm in front of the officers, but his mind raced. Every decision, every mile, every second could change the outcome for hundreds of innocent lives above. And then came the whispers among the crew, the ones passengers would never hear. "Too close," one officer muttered under his breath. Another nodded, eyes scanning the instruments, scanning the black water. Small changes in the hull vibrations, subtle echoes against the steel frame, confirmed it. The predator moved with patience, with precision, and with deadly intent. The Atlantic, which had seemed so serene moments ago, now held a quiet, almost sentient threat, like a coiled snake ready to strike. On deck, a few passengers continued to enjoy the night air, unaware of the full danger. One child pointed at the horizon, asking about the moon's reflection on the waves. A woman clutched her shawl, sensing something strange, though she could not explain it. The subtle shift in atmosphere, the almost imperceptible change as ship's vibration reached them in ways they couldn't articulate. The Atlantic's calm was deceptive, a false sense of security that made the coming danger all the more terrifying. Meanwhile, below decks, crew members moved with methodical urgency. Every crate was accounted for, every compartment sealed. The engineers' hands moved deftly over the turbines, checking every valve, every pipe, every gauge. They felt the subtle changes in the engine vibrations, the way the steel hull responded differently to the waves. Small anomalies that might have been ignored on any other night were now critical signs. They whispered among themselves, knowing that if the U-boat struck, even a minor oversight could turn into catastrophe. And then, almost imperceptibly, the Atlantic betrayed a faint ripple, a subtle shadow moving beneath the surface. The lookout's trained eyes caught it, a pattern in the waves that did not belong. The captain adjusted the course slightly, quietly, almost desperately, hoping the U-boat would misinterpret the ship's movement. Every mile was now a delicate dance between life and death, chance and calculation. Above deck, passengers felt the tension growing without realizing why. The wind carried a strange chill. The waves seemed restless, and the gentle creaks of the ship sounded sharper, louder, more alive. Couples paused in their strolls, staring at the horizon. Children clung a little tighter to their parents. Even the laughter that had echoed through the lounges earlier seemed distant, fragile, unable to mask the unease creeping into every corner of the ship. And as the night deepened further, it became impossible to ignore. The hunter beneath the waves was very close. Its presence was a silent shadow beneath the hull, invisible yet omnipresent. Crew members, trained to sense these things, moved with precision, but their eyes betrayed the tension, the fear, the urgency that lay beneath calm professionalism. Every decision mattered. Every second mattered. Every mile mattered. The Atlantic, infinite and patient, had drawn its predator close, and the first threads of confrontation were tightening with deadly precision. The passengers might have smiled, laughed, or slept a few decks above. But below, the crew, the cargo, and the ship itself were part of a silent battle, a chess game played in shadows, where one misstep could unleash chaos in an instant. And in that tension, that unbearable, silent anticipation, the Atlantic whispered its age-old secret: calm waters are often the most dangerous of all. The Atlantic was pitch black now, stretching endlessly in all directions, broken only by the gentle silver shimmer of moonlight across the waves. The Lusitania moved steadily, a magnificent vessel gliding through the dark water, her lights reflecting on the waves like beacons of warmth and life. But beneath that beauty, danger moved silently. The Atlantic, which had seemed so serene just hours before, now held a predator close, patient and calculating, almost sentient in its precision. On deck, the atmosphere had changed. The few passengers who had lingered outside could feel it: something in the air, a tension in the waves, a faint vibration beneath their feet. A gentleman stopped mid-step, gazing at the water, squinting into the darkness. "Do you see that?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. His companion shook her head, dismissing it as a trick of the moonlight, but the feeling of unease had already rooted itself in their hearts. A mother pulled her child closer, and a young couple's laughter faltered as the wind shifted strangely, brushing past them with a chill that seemed unnatural. Below decks, the crew had reached peak alertness. Every officer was stationed at their posts, eyes scanning instruments, ears tuned to the faintest sound, hands ready for any action. The cargo hold had been inspected multiple times in the last hour, locks checked, crates reinforced. Every turbine and engine gauge was monitored continuously. Engineers moved swiftly, almost silently, their faces etched with concentration and quiet anxiety. Every vibration, every hum, every subtle shift in the hull told them something. Something unseen moved beneath the water, something that had been tracking them all night. The captain remained on the bridge, standing tall but tense, staring into the black expanse of the Atlantic. His hands rested lightly on the rail, fingers tracing the polished steel, but his mind raced. Intelligence reports, previous warnings, subtle signals from the lookout all pointed to the same inescapable conclusion: the U-boat was close. Too close, his instincts, honed by years at sea, screamed that the night was no longer safe, that danger had fully arrived. The lookout's trained eyes caught it again: a faint ripple, a disturbance in the patterns of the waves that should have been smooth under the moonlight. The motion was subtle but unmistakable. The officer called the captain in a whisper, barely audible over the soft hum of the turbines. The captain adjusted the ship's course slightly, each turn calculated to avoid detection, that the ocean held the hunter's advantage. The Atlantic's calm surface was deceptive. Beneath it, a silent predator had already positioned itself, waiting for the perfect strike. Above deck, the passengers began noticing the signs of danger too. The waves seemed different, restless, carrying a subtle rhythm that unnerved them. A few couples stopped walking, staring at the black horizon. Children clutched their parents' hands more tightly. Even the faint creaks of the polished decks seemed sharper, louder, almost alive. The laughter and music of earlier hours had vanished, replaced by whispers, cautious glances, and a growing sense of vulnerability. Below decks, the crew moved like shadows themselves, quietly coordinating, checking and rechecking every detail. Every bolt, every valve, every seal mattered. They whispered about the U-boat's position, about timing and angles, about the absolute need for precision. One misstep could mean disaster, not just for the crew, but for hundreds of innocent passengers above. The tension was so thick that it seemed to press against the walls, the ceilings, and even the steel hull itself. And then came the subtle warning that everyone had been waiting for. A vibration in the water, stronger this time, as if something massive had moved just beneath the ship. Instruments registered a faint, irregular pattern, something that could not be ignored. The captain's jaw tightened. Orders were issued quietly but firmly. Crew members snapped into position, eyes scanning every corridor, every deck, every hatch. The Atlantic, infinite and dark, seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if even the ocean itself knew that the moment of confrontation was near. On deck, passengers felt the unease growing, though they still could not understand why. Shadows in the water appeared darker, the wind carried an unnatural chill, and the ship seemed to creak differently. Some paused, looking toward the horizon, feeling the thrill of fear without knowing its source. Others hurried to their cabins, sensing that something invisible yet undeniable had arrived. The elegance and safety of the Lusitania now felt fragile, ephemeral, like glass floating atop the dark, restless water. Below, the crew's whispers turned sharper, more urgent. Instruments blinked, signals indicated subtle disturbances, and every movement of the ship was carefully calculated to maintain balance and avoid drawing attention. The Atlantic had become a stage, and the Lusitania was the unwitting actor, playing out a scene that would soon erupt into chaos. Every heartbeat, every creak, every sigh of wind mattered. Every second stretched, heavy with anticipation, suspense, and an invisible threat that had already begun its silent approach. And in that moment, as the Atlantic held its breath, the passengers' world of comfort, luxury, and laughter hung by a thread. Above, they could feel only hints of danger, fragments of intuition. Below, the crew prepared, aware that the night had reached a critical turning point. And beneath it all, the predator moved closer, patient, calculating, inevitable. The Atlantic was no longer a calm sea, it was a stage set for history. And the story of the Lusitania was about to enter its most perilous chapter. The Atlantic had grown almost unnaturally still, the waves quiet, almost reverent. The Lusitania cut through the black water like a silent colossus, elegant and unassuming. But beneath the surface, a predator had already drawn its final aim. The hum of the turbines, once reassuring, now seemed tense, vibrating through the hull with a strange urgency. Crew members on the lower decks had their hands on every instrument, eyes flicking between dials, charts, and monitors. Every sound, every subtle creak of steel, every ripple in the water carried meaning. On deck, passengers sensed something had changed. The wind carried a strange bite, unusual for this time of year. The waves reflected the moonlight in odd patterns, and shadows moved where they shouldn't. Couples paused mid-step, children clutched hands tightly, and whispers began to echo through the hallways. There was a thrill, a fear, and an unnameable tension that grew heavier with every passing second. The luxury of the ship, the polished wood, the chandeliers, the soft music now seemed almost surreal, a fragile illusion over the dark, hungry Atlantic. Below, the crew's whispers had turned urgent. "Too close," one officer said, voice low and tense. Engineers tightened valves, checked turbines, and moved swiftly between the cargo holds, ensuring every crate was secure. Every compartment had been checked multiple times, but they knew the invisible threat could exploit the smallest mistake. Eyes met, nods passed silently, and a sense of impending danger hung over every corridor. Then came the first unmistakable sign. A subtle, unnatural disturbance moved across the water's surface, barely visible even to the trained eye, but enough for the captain and his officers to know the U-boat was preparing its strike. The ship shifted slightly in the water as small waves formed in unnatural patterns, the hum of the engines catching every subtle vibration. Orders were issued swiftly, quietly, but firmly. The course was adjusted, turbines pushed harder, and lookouts trained their eyes on the horizon, scanning for movement invisible to the ordinary passenger. Above deck, passengers began to feel the shift more clearly. A faint vibration underfoot, shadows flickering across the water, and a strange hush seemed to fall over the ship. Conversation had all but stopped. Some glanced nervously toward the horizon, sensing unease without fully understanding its source. A mother clutched her child, whispering reassurances, but her own voice trembled. The Atlantic, so calm just hours before, now carried a sense of menace that could be felt in every breath of wind. The crew, meanwhile, moved like clockwork under immense pressure. Every second counted. The slightest miscalculation could mean catastrophe. Officers communicated in terse whispers, checking instruments, adjusting course, and coordinating emergency maneuvers with precision honed from years at sea. The hidden cargo, the turbines, the passengers' safety all depended on flawless execution. Each creak, each subtle echo through the steel hull, reminded them of the invisible hunter beneath the waves. And then, almost imperceptibly at first, a shadow broke the surface, dark, deliberate, moving with intent. The U-boat had positioned itself, waiting for the perfect moment. The captain's jaw tightened. He knew this was no longer a drill, no longer a subtle threat. The Atlantic, infinite and patient, had revealed its predator. Below, the crew braced, silent but alert, every muscle taut, every eye sharp. The moment of collision between human ambition and unseen force was imminent. On deck, passengers began to whisper in hushed tones, sensing the tension in ways they couldn't yet explain. The waves seemed alive, restless. The creaks of the polished decks sounded sharper. Even the soft glow of the lamps seemed fragile, as if any moment they could be snuffed out by the darkness pressing in from all sides. The elegance and comfort of the ship felt temporary now, like glass floating above an abyss. The captain issued further orders, subtle adjustments to course and speed, designed to confuse the predator beneath. Crew members executed maneuvers with precise timing. Engineers monitored turbines and boilers, feeling the hull's vibrations with each shift in the water. The Atlantic itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, the darkness beneath hiding something patient, calculating, and merciless. And there, in the silent tension of the night, the Lusitania sailed on, majestic yet vulnerable. Passengers sensed a change, the first real signs of danger, while the crew acted with urgency, discipline, and focus. Beneath the black water, the hunter waited. Above, life continued unaware, but the calm was over. The Atlantic had whispered its warning, and the threads of fate were tightening around every deck, every corridor, every passenger, and every heartbeat aboard. The Atlantic seemed almost alive that night, black and endless, carrying the weight of unseen eyes beneath its surface. The Lusitania moved forward, elegant and proud, but the calm had shattered. A tension that had been building for hours now erupted into a palpable force, felt in every creak of the decks, in every vibration through the hull, in every whisper of wind that swept across the ship. Below decks, the crew was no longer merely alert, they were in full emergency mode. Officers barked quiet, urgent orders, coordinating with engineers and lookouts. Every valve, every gauge, every instrument was scrutinized. Crates that had been checked and double-checked were inspected once more, locks reinforced, and hidden compartments monitored. The turbines hummed louder now, responding to sudden adjustments in speed and course. The steel hull vibrated as if it knew the hunter was near. And then it happened, a ripple too distinct, too deliberate to be mistaken. The U-boat had revealed itself beneath the water, close enough that the captain could sense its presence through subtle disturbances in the waves. The lookout's eyes widened, their hearts racing. "We've been spotted," one muttered, voice low but tense. The Atlantic, so vast and silent, had become a stage for a deadly confrontation. On deck, passengers began to notice the first real signs of danger. The air carried a strange, metallic chill. Waves broke in patterns that didn't match the wind. The gentle creaks of polished wood now sounded ominous. Conversations faltered, laughter died out, and couples exchanged worried glances. Some passengers hurried to cabins. Others stood frozen, staring into the black horizon, unable to articulate the sense of imminent threat. A few children cried softly, sensing the anxiety of their parents. The illusion of safety had vanished. The crew acted with precision, moving like shadows. Engineers adjusted turbines, officers checked emergency procedures, and sailors prepared lifeboats and safety lines. Every order was sharp, every movement deliberate. The captain remained calm in front of the crew, but his eyes betrayed the tension gnawing at him. Each second now carried immense consequence. One misstep, one overlooked sign, one delay, and catastrophe could unfold. The U-boat beneath the waves moved deliberately, silent, calculating. Its shadow shifted under the hull, causing subtle but detectable disturbances. The Atlantic, infinite and patient, seemed almost to pulse with anticipation. The ship itself trembled slightly, as if it knew the predator was finally close enough to strike. Above, passengers could no longer dismiss the unease. A shadow appeared on the water that reflected strangely in the moonlight. The wind howled faintly, carrying a chill that made skin crawl. Whispered questions turned into murmurs, murmurs into panic. The first real sense of danger had arrived, and it was impossible to ignore. Below, the crew's whispers turned to commands. Emergency maneuvers were executed with precision honed over decades at sea. Lifeboats were readied, passengers guided to muster stations, and officers moved quickly through the ship, checking compartments, monitoring turbines, and scanning the horizon. Every heartbeat, every step, every breath was charged with tension. The Atlantic, dark and infinite, had become a stage for a deadly ballet of human skill versus unseen menace. The subtle vibrations beneath the ship grew stronger. The U-boat had positioned itself for the first move. The captain adjusted speed, course, and trajectory simultaneously, calculating angles, anticipating movements. Engineers responded instantly, valves adjusted, turbines pushed harder, the ship shuddering slightly as it altered its path. Every action was a prayer against fate. And then, above the deck, the first passengers truly understood. The water seemed wrung alive, almost breathing. The shadows beneath the waves shifted with purpose. A scream rang out from a distant cabin. A child cried out. Panic began to spread like wildfire, but the crew maintained a thin thread of control. Calm, but tense, they guided people, their voices steady even as adrenaline surged through their veins. The Atlantic, infinite and patient, held its breath. The Lusitania, once a symbol of luxury and safety, now stood as a testament to human courage under pressure, sailing straight into the teeth of an invisible predator. Every second ticked by with unbearable suspense. Every vibration, every shadow, every whispered order hinted at the disaster that could erupt in the next heartbeat. And above, passengers clung to hope, unaware that the Atlantic's hidden hunter was already circling, patient, calculating, inevitable. The Atlantic was no longer calm. It had become a dark, living entity, moving in rhythm with the unseen predator beneath the waves. The Lusitania sailed through the blackness, elegant and proud, yet vulnerable, every deck and corridor charged with tension. The first signs of the imminent strike had already been felt, the crew on high alert, passengers beginning to sense danger. But now, the moment of confrontation was unavoidable. Below decks, the crew moved with frantic precision. Officers shouted urgent commands, engineers adjusted turbines, valves, and boilers, their hands moving with practiced urgency. The hidden cargo, once silent, now seemed to vibrate with latent threat. Every lock, hatch, and instrument was checked again. The ship's steel hull groaned under the strain of subtle maneuvers, each creak a warning of the fragile balance between safety and disaster. On deck, passengers were finally awake to the reality of danger. The calm of earlier hours was gone. The waves were restless, shadows shifting across the water. A distant vibration traveled through the hull, subtle but unmistakable. Mothers clutched children, couples whispered in fear, and a few brave souls stared at the black horizon, sensing the predator below. The illusion of luxury and safety had vanished, replaced by a raw, visceral fear. And then it struck a sudden, violent ripple as the U-boat made its move. The Atlantic shuddered, and a deep, low vibration ran through the hull. Alarms blared, officers shouted commands, turbines roared, and the Lusitania attempted evasive maneuvers. Chaos erupted. Crew members rushed through corridors, coordinating passengers, securing cargo, and preparing lifeboats. The Atlantic had become a stage for a deadly dance between human skill and the relentless, patient hunter beneath the waves. Above, panic spread among passengers, screams echoed through cabins, children cried, mothers shouted, couples clung to each other. The chandeliers reflected flickering shadows, lamps swung with the violent rocking, and conversations dissolved into terror-stricken murmurs. The Atlantic, infinite and merciless, had claimed its dominion over the ship. The crew executed maneuvers with meticulous precision. Lifeboats were readied, emergency signals sent, officers guided passengers toward safety. The vibrations beneath the hull grew stronger. Each shudder reminded everyone of the predator circling beneath. Every heartbeat, every decision, every movement mattered. And then, in the darkness and chaos, a surreal calm descended for a moment, a fleeting pause where the Atlantic seemed to hold its breath. The Lusitania, once a symbol of elegance and comfort, had become a testament to human courage, resilience, and the relentless suspense of survival. Every deck, corridor, wave, and breath carried the weight of history. As the ship sailed into uncertainty, the story of the Atlantic, the predator beneath, and the brave souls aboard the Lusitania was etched forever in memory. And now, dear viewer, if this journey through suspense, danger, and history gripped you, make sure you don't miss the next chapter of epic oceanic mysteries. Hit like if you felt the tension. Subscribe to stay connected for more cinematic stories that pull you right into the heart of the Atlantic. And don't forget to ring the bell to join us on every voyage into history's most thrilling and mysterious nights. Because the ocean has many secrets, and this channel is your window into them, dark, suspenseful, and unforgettable. Stay with us and sail into the unknown, one story at a time.